Pew Research came out with a new poll recently on religion. So I wanted to give it a read because it's actually pretty relevant. It's pretty important. And something else I want to make note of real quick. American Atheists is sponsoring a poll that I would appreciate if you guys went and took the poll. It's supposed to be something like this poll that we're looking at right now. I'll put a link to the poll in the description, so just take a look around for that. So let's take a look at this poll that Pew Research has been doing, or this research that they've been doing. See what it has to say. The title of it, by the way, it's on Pew's website. Title is, "In U.S., Decline of Christianity Continues at Rapid Pace." And it was released on October 17th, 2019. It says, "The religious landscape of the U.S. continues to change at a rapid clip. In Pew Research Center telephone surveys conducted in 2018 and 2019, 65% of American adults describe themselves as Christians when asked about their religion, down 12 percentage points over the past decade." Okay, so it used to be 77%, I guess. Meanwhile, the religiously unaffiliated share of the population, consisting of people who describe their religious identity as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, now stands at 26%, up from 17% in 2009. Both Protestantism and Catholicism are experiencing losses of population share. Currently, 43% of U.S. adults identify with Protestantism, down from 51% in 2009, and 1 in 5 adults, or 20%, are Catholic, down from 23% in 2009. Meanwhile, all subsets of the religiously unaffiliated population, a group also known as religious nuns, quote unquote, have seen their numbers swell. Self-described atheists now account for 4% of U.S. adults, up modestly but significantly from 2% in 2009. Agnostics make up 5% of U.S. adults, up from 3% a decade ago, and 17% of Americans now describe their religion as nothing in particular, up from 12% in 2009. Members of non-Christian religions also have grown modestly as a share of the adult population. That's actually a pretty big deal. The percentage of people who claim to be atheist, just outright atheist, are typically going to be part of this community in one way or another. It said it's 4% of U.S. adults. That is pretty significant. There was a time when 43% of the U.S. population believed that Noah's Ark was a real, literal story. I don't know what that is now. It may tell us in a few minutes. Another thing is the fact that a lot of these people who are giving up religion, basically, like it says, I think it said 26% of the country says nothing in particular. Religious nuns, they may have turned in their religious nature for spirituality, quote unquote. If they turned in their religious nature for spirituality, it means they could be getting into more new agey stuff that's fairly popular in a lot of densely populated areas like California and things like that. So I wouldn't count it as a complete win, but we're making ground here. We're winning against extremism at the very least. That number is down, so I'm happy to see that. Just taking a look at the charts here, it says, in U.S., smaller share of adults identify as Christians, while religious nuns have grown. And it's got a couple of pictures of some charts here. Protestants and Catholics shrinking as share of U.S. population. All subsets of nuns are growing. It's very promising. Let's continue reading. These are among the key findings of a new analysis of trends in the religious composition and church-going habits of the American public, based on recent Pew Research Center Random Digit Dial, RDD, political polling on the telephone. The data shows that the trend toward religious disaffiliation, documented in the center's 2007 and 2014 religious landscape studies, and before that in major national studies like the General Social Survey, GSS, has continued apace. So it's a trend that we can kind of map. It's a trend we see happening, the drop of religiousness or religiosity, if you will, in the U.S. That's a good sign. Pew Research Center's 2007 and 2014 religious landscape studies were huge national RDD surveys, each of which included interviews with more than 35,000 respondents who were asked dozens of detailed questions about their religious identities, beliefs, and practices. The center has not yet conducted a third such study, and when the landscape study is repeated, it's likely to use new methods that may prevent it from being directly comparable to the previous studies. Growing challenges to conducting national surveys by telephone have led to the center to rely increasingly on self-administered surveys conducted online. That's a little bit of a problem. When you're looking at polls like this, you got to think about the methodology. It's a really, really big deal. Like they're saying here, they had random digit dial political polling on the telephone. If they're getting their data about who is what from landlines, who has landlines? It's largely the older community. Like younger people, say people under 45, 50, don't have landlines. I don't have a landline. I don't think I've ever had a landline in my life. Maybe for a solid month. It's very skewed in that direction. They're not really polling U.S. adults necessarily. They're polling U.S. adults over the age of X or Y. You got to take this with a grain of salt, certainly, but it is an indicator that it's dropping anyways. And I saw a second ago they mentioned, it says here, growing challenges to conducting national surveys by telephone have led the center to rely increasingly on self-administered surveys conducted online. Again, who is online taking these surveys largely? Where are you presenting them? How are you giving them to people? How are you making them available to people? It's going to skew the results. There's a big complicated thing about polling. It's like you'd think the more people that you get involved in the polling, the more accurate it would be, right? But that's not actually true. After a certain point, the bigger your sample size gets, the less accurate the results are. It's complicated, and it takes a lot of work and research and skilled people to understand the results and what the margin of error would be and things like that. So anyway, going on with the article, it says, while no new religious landscape study is available or in the immediate offing, the center has collected 5 additional years of data since the 2014 landscape study from RDD political polls. Again, RDD is random digit dialing. The samples from these political polls are not as large as the landscape studies, even when all of the political polls conducted in a year are combined. But together, 88 surveys from 2009 and 2019 included interviews with 168,890 Americans. That's a fairly big sample size. But like I said, bigger is in terms of sample size does not mean more accurate. There are people who go to school for like 8 years to get a PhD in mathematics to understand how this whole polling thing works and margins of error and accuracy and everything. It's very, very complex. These surveys do not include nearly as many questions about religion as the landscape studies do. However, as part of the demographic battery of questions that ask respondents about their age, race, educational attainment, and other background characteristics, each of these political polls also include one basic question about religious identity. What is your present religion, if any? Are you Protestant, Roman Catholic, Mormon, Orthodox, such as Greek or Russian Orthodox, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, something else, or nothing in particular? Weird they included Mormonism in there, but not Jehovah's Witnesses, because they're similar size. They're both really kind of honestly odd groups with odd beliefs. Maybe, I guess Mormonism is just a little bit more mainstream than Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know. Anyway. Additionally, most of these political polls include a question about religious attendance. Aside from weddings and funerals, how often do you attend religious services? More than once a week, once or twice a month, a few times a year, seldom, or never. Taken together, these two questions, one about religious identity, the other about religious attendance, can help shed light on religious trends in the U.S. The article is an interesting read, to say the least, and you guys should definitely give it a look. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.